Yeah, thank you for being part of all this. I hope you're having a good time in your group. We're talking about leadership, talking about influence, and it'd be good to think about the influence you have, the opportunities you have to make a difference, where you feel you're being heard, where you're being listened to, where you're able to lead, where you're able to set a culture, where you're able to cause a direction, and because that's really important. It's part of our just of who we are, that we have influence, that we have opportunity to make a difference, to change the culture that we're part of, and God will increase your influence as you pray for Him to do that. Maybe you want to pray the Jabez prayer, or even look at that tonight. And in 1 Samuel 8, we get some really bad examples of leadership. We have Joel and Abijah, who it says that they served at Beersheba, but they didn't walk in the ways of the Lord, and they turned aside after dishonest gain, accepted bribes, and perverted justice. And we see this marriage of money and power together in leadership that just ends up in corruption. People's heart and mind being pulled by the money god, wanting to just enrich themselves at the expense of people who are bringing the offerings or dispelling justice. The bribery thing is so awful, isn't it, in so many countries around the world, and maybe you've got experience even in our own country where it's just not fair, where it's not right, where there's corruption, and we can be praying about that and asking God to bring justice, because it's so important for everybody that we live in a society where there isn't corruption and bribery. And they were instilling that because they just wanted the money, they wanted the power, they felt they could do that, they felt they were above the system, and so important to help us to learn how to to live within the the system that God has put us in terms of our leadership. And then there was the whole dialogue between Samuel and God, and then trialogue really with the people about what a new king might do to them, and how the king would establish his own prestige. He would want to be looked at. He would want fame. He would need the resources of the people in order to provide a good spread for other kings, and for those to intimidate people as well, those who would want to take his place. And so you have this whole thing about how the king would take the resources rather than release the resources, how the king would take their sons and their money and their fields and the best of their vineyards for himself, and rather than for the people, rather than for the system, rather than for the society. And we have that the same pattern really, where perverting justice is matched with prestige and the trappings of success, and even in the end enslaving people to their own purposes, rather than releasing people for the benefit of the community and society. So how can we use our leadership well? How can we release people? How can we release resources rather than draw resources to ourselves? And because all of that's really important, but the key thing is the way that the king becomes God, where the king receives the tithes and the offerings, where the king receives the firstborn son, where the king receives their daughters, rather than God, who is meant to be worshipped and praised and offered to as a result of as part of these offerings and firstborn sons and your daughters and all of that. There was just a way of pulling resources to the center and becoming godlike, deifying the leader. And maybe we've seen that in different societies around the world where leaders have been deified, and it's really unhealthy, isn't it? And we can make sure that we're not little gods by looking to the God who became a leader, the God who became king at the cross, a God who lived amongst us in relative poverty, certainly of modest means, who didn't take on the trappings of success but rode a donkey into Jerusalem. Maybe you want to look at some of the ways Jesus treated money, the way that he treated power, the way that he handled prestige, what Jesus did with all of those things, in order that we can model a better leadership. Because, as I said, we are all leaders. We have influence. How can we do it better that looks like Jesus? Have a good time as you talk about this stuff. I think it'll be a really fascinating evening, and I trust it will be helpful to you over these next weeks, and also as you plot away ahead over the next few years. Bless you. See you in a bit. Bye bye.